Is there anyone here for the first time tonight? First time on Zoom? Okay. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Patrice Koelsch, a longtime community member and a board member, teacher here, and substituting for Shelley tonight, and they are leading a retreat. I want to begin with a land acknowledgement because I'm so acutely aware that we are in this sacred space. You need to be a little louder. Okay, could we have the sound up a little bit in the room? Thanks, Eric. Thank you for asking. See, is this any better? That will work for you? Okay. I just got hearing aids about a month ago, got them in May. So I am suddenly, the world is a lot louder than it used to be. And I'm not a very good judge of how it is for other people. So as I was saying, this is really, this is a very sacred place. And it is so close to the sacred Dakota places, especially the Bedote, which is the confluence of the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers. And in Dakota cosmology, that's where the first people emerged. So women used to go and try to have their babies at that point so that their infants, the first light they would see is the same light that the first people saw. So it's a really beautiful, beautiful story. And just to remember that we are really here on land that has great significance. So common ground is sited on the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary homeland of the Dakota people. This land holds great historical, spiritual, and personal significance to its original inhabitants and their descendants who live here today, and to their future generations. We can acknowledge the sovereignty of Native nations and our obligations to live up to treaty agreements. It is our intention to rectify the harms that we have committed and those that we continue to commit. And just really take a moment that the harms we continue to commit in our Buddhist orientation toward non-harming. This land acknowledgement is only one small part of supporting Indigenous communities, and it is our hope that our land acknowledgement statement will inspire others to stand with us in solidarity with Native nations and to amplify the voices of Indigenous people leading grassroots change movements. So tonight, as usual, we're going to have about a 30-minute meditation. I'll do a little guiding in the beginning, and then about 10 minutes before the end, I will do some additional guiding. What I'm going to talk about this evening are the traditional 5 daily contemplations. And so I will do a little bit of guiding around those contemplations at the end of our sit together. So please make yourselves comfortable. Remember, this is not the Breath Olympics. And enjoy your practice. And when I sit in community, I always like to begin by just having a moment of awareness and appreciation for the support we get from each other and that we give to each other. So feeling that web of support and encouragement, we can just settle where we are and just let the attention gently come into the body. And mindfulness is about recognizing what is really there in the present moment without a lot of elaboration or stories, judgments. So we bring our attention into the body with a kindly attitude, an attitude of curiosity, a very gentle curiosity. Just how are things in the body right now? What are we aware of? The body is our vehicle for understanding. For perceiving. So we just bring a kindly awareness to the body, just as it is. And just as we bring this kindly awareness and curiosity to the body, we can bring the same kindly curiosity to the mind, just as it is right now. And see if there's a mood, an attitude that might be coloring this moment's experience. Just letting ourselves be aware of the mind, just as it is right now. And then if you'd like, you can just relax into an open awareness practice, where the awareness is not so much a flashlight on one thing, but a lantern, a light, a lamp illuminating. And just notice what there is to be aware of. We're not trying to bring about any special states of mind, any special experiences. Letting go of any striving. And if it's helpful to support a kind of stability, you are certainly welcome to let the attention rest on the breath or on hearing. We just bring this kindly, relaxed awareness to our experience just as it is right now, without clinging, without pushing away. Just with a generosity of spirit, allowing things to be as they are right now, and as best we can, seeing that clearly. So let's practice in silence for a while. So we'll now reflect on the 5 daily contemplations. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that aging is a part of life. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that aging is a part of life. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that getting sick is a part of life. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that getting sick is a part of life. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that dying is part of life. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that dying is part of life. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that loss is a part of life. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that loss is a part of life. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that I am the inheritor of my past actions, the owner of my present actions, and the fabricator of my future actions. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that I am the inheritor of my past actions, the owner of my present actions, and the fabricator of my future actions. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that aging is a part of life. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that getting sick is a part of life. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that dying is part of life. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that loss is part of life. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that I am the inheritor of my past actions, the owner of my present actions, and the fabricator of my future actions. So please take a minute and stretch, say hello to someone. Well, thank you everyone for being here in the room at Common Ground and in the Zoom room. So nice to see so many people. So tonight I'd like to talk about how we might skillfully work with these 5 subjects for contemplation. And it is a daily practice that many people engage in, and it's a practice that can seem a little daunting. I want to begin by reading the sutta in which the Buddha encourages people to do this. And it is called the Upajjhana Atthana Sutta, Subjects for Contemplation. So it's from the Anguttara Nikaya. the Buddha says, there are 5 facts that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. Which 5? I am subject to aging. I have not gone beyond aging. This is the first fact that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. I am subject to illness, have not gone beyond illness. And this is the second fact that one should reflect on often, whether one is a man or a woman, lay or ordained. I am subject to death, have not gone beyond death. Again, the third fact. I will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. This is the fourth fact. I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, have my actions as my arbitrator. Whatever I do, for good or for evil, to that I will fall heir. These are the 5 facts that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect that I am subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging? There are beings who are intoxicated with the typical youth's intoxication with youth. Because of that intoxication with youth, they conduct themselves in a bad way, in body, in speech, and in mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, that youth's intoxication with youth will be either entirely abandoned or grow weaker. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect that I am subject to illness, have not gone beyond illness? There are beings who are intoxicated with the typical healthy person's intoxication with health. Because of that intoxication with health, they conduct themselves in a bad way, in body, in speech, and in mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, that healthy person's intoxication with health will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect that I am subject to death, have not gone beyond death? There are beings who are intoxicated with a typical living person's intoxication with life. Because of that intoxication with life, they conduct themselves in a bad way, in body, in speech, and in mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, that living person's intoxication with life will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect that I will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me? There are beings who feel desire and passion for the things they find dear and appealing. Because of that passion, they conduct themselves in a bad way, in body, in speech, and in mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, that desire and passion for things they find dear and appealing will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect that I am owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, and have my actions as my arbitrator? Whatever I do for good or for evil, to that I will fall heir. There are beings who conduct themselves in a bad way, in body, in speech, and in mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, that bad conduct in body, speech, and mind will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. Now, a disciple of the noble ones considers this: I am not the only one subject to aging who has not gone beyond aging. To the extent that there are beings, past and future, passing away, all beings are subject to aging and have not gone beyond aging. When he, she often reflects on this, the factors of the path take birth. He or she sticks with that path, develops it, cultivates it. As he or she sticks with that path, develops it, and cultivates it, the fetters are abandoned, the obsessions destroyed. Further, a disciple of the noble ones considers this: I'm not the only one subject to illness who has not gone beyond illness. I am not the only one subject to death who has not gone beyond death. I am not the only one who will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. A disciple of the noble ones considers this: I am not the only one who is owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, and have my actions as my arbitrator, who, whatever I do, for good or evil, to that I will fall heir. To the extent that there are beings, past and future, passing away, re-arising, all beings are the owner of their actions, heir to their actions, born of their actions, related through their actions, and have their actions as their arbitrator. Whatever they do, for good or for evil, that they will fall heir. When he, she often reflects on this, the factors of the path take birth. He, she sticks with that path, develops it, cultivates it. As she sticks with that, he or she sticks with that path, develops it, and cultivates it, the fetters are abandoned and the obsessions destroyed. So this is the Buddha's very clear advice. And I think what is so striking about it, one of the things that's so striking is this image of intoxication. Very strong image, intoxicated with youthfulness, intoxicated with health, intoxicated with vitality, intoxicated with the sorts of things that we care about, and how so the training is really to sober up about these sorts of things, to have a really clear, sober understanding of the facts of life. And what the Buddha is suggesting is that when we have a clear understanding of it, that we will behave in really upright ways, that we won't do things that are harmful through our bodily actions, through our speech, and through our mental activities. We won't engage in those sorts of things, so that it is really worthwhile for us to reflect on this. And the guided meditation that I offered is really based, I think it's both Carolyn Jones and Zohar Levi are two teachers that I've heard teach that way. Sometimes it's just, I am subject to aging. I have not gone beyond aging, but I love the way they do it about breathing gently. I lovingly remember, with this sort of kindly attitude toward ourselves, that we're not, that we're treating each other and ourselves with great kindness. So breathing gently, I lovingly remember that aging is a part of life, that I am getting old. In many ways, it is a great good fortune to grow old. I mean, we think about how many people die young, die before they're really able to have a very full life. So in many ways, aging is a benefit. Although, as one ages, the body often deteriorates, and that's pretty challenging. I often think, I wish I had the body that I had 25 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, but I wouldn't trade my mind for any of that. I mean, I think that's sort of the price of growing old is experience. And I think the one thing that I become more and more aware of as I get older is I just take things so much less personally. It just, things that seem so personal, and when it just not as personal. You know, sometimes you're just the placeholder when the oatmeal hits the fan. So, you know, and you just happen to be there. But you know, and it's interesting that Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, in one of the stories about the Buddha, as the Buddha lived into his 80s, and Ananda, his attendant, one day comments to him, you know, Venerable Sir, your skin used to glow so much. You used to be, you know, be upright and glowing, and you're not that way anymore. You know, that the Buddha's skin got sort of sallow, that he was subject to backaches, he was bent over. You know, that this person also was subject to aging. And one of the little sort of meditations that I do when I reflect on this aging body and am not all that taken with it. I think about, I've always had dogs my whole life. I can't imagine not having a dog or two in my life. And I think about how many old dogs I have. And right now I have a 12-year-old dog, and she's gotten a little sway-backed, a little lumpy in places. And I think, I'm just crazy about her. I just really love her. And I don't love her wishing that she had the body she had when she was, you know, a 7-year-old dog. Like, I really love her as she is. And for me, it's the thing. So what is it that keeps me from loving my sort of old dog body the way I love my dog's body? And it really is, it's been a wonderful exercise for me to think about, why is it that it's so easy to love her as she is physically and not have that same sort of affection for myself. So some of it, it's a practice, but it's a wonderful meditation to think about. I say to myself, you know, Patrice, here it is, your old dog body, and you know, that's a part of life, that aging. Breathing gently. I lovingly remember that getting sick is a part of life. And I always say to that, I say, illness and infirmity await me. And I have a poem in here that, this is the, what did I bring it? Here it is. Jane Kenyon, a wonderful poet. Jane Kenyon died, I think, in the 90s, and she was only in her 40s when she died. And what's so interesting is that Jane Kenyon was married to the poet Donald Hall, and he was about 20 years older than she was, and he had had cancer, and sort of the expectation was that Jane Kenyon would be taking care of Donald Hall. But Jane Kenyon got leukemia and died in her 40s. So again, it's very unexpected that, you know, sort of expected that the older poet would die first, and instead Jane died. And this is a poem she wrote that I think is very wise, and it's called Otherwise. I got out of bed on 2 strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, ripe, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birch wood. All morning, I did the work I love. At noon, I lay down with my mate. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed in a room with paintings on the walls and planned another day just like this day. But one day I know it will be otherwise. And I think that's such a reflection that I have frequently about, you know, really appreciating the goodness in my day and knowing that it might be otherwise, and how quickly things change. A couple of years ago, it was in the winter. I got out of bed about 6 o'clock in the morning. My dog wanted to go out, and I put on my coat, and I actually was listening. I'd been listening for a little bit to a Dharma talk about impermanence. So I had my earbuds in, had my phone, put my coat on, went and let my dog out, and I stepped on the top of our back steps, and there was ice on it. And I flew off the steps, and I broke my back. And I mean, ironic, right? The Dharma talk on impermanence. And fortunately, I had my phone, so I could call someone to come and get me out of the backyard. But it was just 1 minute being completely healthy and intact, and the next minute in just intense pain, knowing that I'd done something really, really dramatic. And we remember about how quickly things changed with COVID. Like in the beginning of March 2020, most of us sort of had plans about what we were going to do that spring. And 2 weeks in, everything changed. It just changes on a dime. And so this idea that illness and infirmity await me, that's really there. And I know that sometimes people who live with disabilities call non-disabled people TABs, temporarily able-bodied, that all of us are, it's just like me, sort of one slip on the stairs, and everything can change. So it's, and there are people who live with chronic illness all the time, who will hardly ever have a day of what we might call good health. And so it's really being aware that this is sort of the human condition. It's the condition of all animals, actually. And I made a note here just to recommend. There's a wonderful book called How to Be Sick by a woman named Toni Bernard, a Buddhist meditator. And she, in the early 2000s, she's a law professor at Davis, and she and her husband went to Paris to celebrate something, and she got sick on the plane and has never been well since then. And it's called like post-viral syndrome. It's and she wrote a book about what it's like when you can't predict one day to the next whether you will be able to get out of bed. And Toni, Toni Bernard, it's a great book, and I've shared it with friends who have had serious illnesses and people who live with people who have serious illnesses, and it is really a really wonderful, very practical book. Page 1, page. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that dying is a part of life. And I add to that, my death approaches daily. I really think about that every day. My death approaches daily. And can we accept that the time and the manner of our death is often really unknown? And what really brought this home to me was in the 90s. I was a care partner at a foster home for people who were dying with AIDS. And I worked there part-time. And there was a person there, a woman in her 60s, this just wonderful person who'd had a very, 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 very hard life. And she said that she was always grateful any time she could go to work. And she had a sort of life where she worked in a canning factory during the day, and she then worked as a waitress at night. She was a single parent. She raised 4 kids. And I mean, she was just a really hard worker. And she talked with great gratitude that, when she was able to support her kids. And late in life, her husband had abandoned her, and she met a man. They got married, and he died sort of mysteriously about a year after they got married. And he probably died of AIDS because she was then diagnosed with AIDS. So, so she was there for a couple of months, and I just felt it was such a gift to know her, know how hard she worked. And when she actually was dying, she was non-responsive. We would just wet her lips and keep her very clean, but she was not eating anything. And every time I would leave, I would just kind of hold her hands, and I just, in my heart, think about how grateful I was for this person, how much I wished her well. And then I'd come back a day or two later, and she was still with us. I mean, she just had this, like the Energizer Bunny. I mean, she had a heart that just kept on and on, although she was just like a little bird. She was so real, and all of her kids were there. So I kept thinking, like every time I left, I thought, okay, well, that was it. She's going to die by the time I get back. And I worked evenings, and so one evening I came back thinking this person would have died. And my husband came home, and this was in the 90s. And he was a serious racquetball player. And he had been playing in a league, and he told me about this person that he was going to play. And he said, he's really good. I don't think I'm going to beat him. And he said that he won the first 2 matches. And the person said to him, guy in his 50s, again, a serious racket sport person, said to him, you've won the match, but why don't we play the 3rd game, and let me see if I can get my serve back. And on the 2nd serve, he dropped dead on the court. And it was so shocking. I mean, afterwards, it was discovered that he'd probably had a heart attack previous to it, but it wasn't sufficient for him to know. So he died of a heart attack on the court. And I just thought, I mean, here I was so convinced that I knew that this person was going to die. And she didn't die. She hung on for a little bit longer. And here's this person who goes to play a game of racquetball with no idea that this was his last hour. And it just brought home in such a visceral way that we just don't know. We just don't know. Like it only takes one drunk driver, and that's it for us. So that really makes this sort of meditation on death for me like something to really, really consider. You just don't know. And it's also made it so that, I sometimes when I'm feeling a little snarky, I just think, I don't want to, if I never see this person again, I don't want to remember this is the last thing I said to him. It has really sort of cleaned up my act in some ways, and just parting with people that I care about. That I realize life is so fragile. The Buddha was sick for a while before he died. He was sick for a while, and then he died probably of food poisoning. And he had a painful death, and he died in what at the time was a really inauspicious place. He died in, I think it was Lumbini, but like people want to die in like Varanasi or and he died in this kind of like boondocks. So his disciples were sort of disappointed. And the Buddha was also, at that time, he was really trying to head back toward where he came from, because it was a time of great political unrest. And the two kings who had been his supporters, both of them were killed by their sons. So, I mean, like sort of the end of the Buddha's life, things are really grim. It was not clear that the community would endure. He's sick. He dies in this inauspicious place. Sort of sometimes people, if you see the images of the Buddha on his deathbed, like in Thailand, like they're quite glorious. But actually, historically, the Buddha was sick, and he died, and he bore his illness without complaint at all. But it was really clear that he was really sick, and people were really concerned about what was going to happen, once he died. So this is not something that every one of us will die, and sort of meditation sometimes, if you're on a bus or a plane or something, just think, okay, everyone on this bus will die sometime. Interestingly, I think this makes us just feel so much affection for everyone else, to realize we're all in that same position. We're all sort of brothers and sisters in death. So it's a really important contemplation, that we don't know the time, we don't know when, we don't know how, and to be aware that at any time this is possible. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that loss is a part of life, that all that is dear and delightful to me will be separated from me. This is the idea that, on death, that we have nothing. It's my dad used to always say, you can't take it with you. But that idea that, and I think this is sort of one of the hard things for people that they're separated from the people they love. And Mingyur Rinpoche had something I thought very helpful to say once. He said, one of the hardest things for people when they're dying is their concern for their loved ones. And that really it makes it so challenging. And Mingyur Rinpoche said that his counsel to people is, he said, think of the compassionate beings you have encountered in your life, and trust that the compassionate beings will show up for your loved ones, that they too will be taken care of. And that it's a matter of faith, of trust that those whom you leave behind are going to be treated with compassion. And also, I think it's really important to know that the love you've given to people is what will remain. You may be gone, but that love will remain. Because I'm in my 70s, I now have had a number of close friends who have died. And I think about, what I've learned from them, what the gift of their friendship was. I think about my friend Cal Appleby, who kind of got me involved in going to correctional facilities to teach meditation. And Cal, I thought there is not a spiritual practice that Cal isn't willing to try at least once and maybe twice. And he just had such enthusiasm and such generosity of spirit. And my other friends who've died, I think of them. Sometimes they've given me, I have a piece of jewelry or something, a scarf or something, and I just think, oh, and I just remember the goodness of that person. That person sort of lives on, and that's one thing that we can reflect on. That although we will be separated, that the good we do, we might think about, for those of you whose parents, like my parents, have passed on, like I think about, what What are the gifts I got from my parents? And I just feel that, they live on in me in a way that when I do certain sorts of things, I think, oh yeah, this is what I learned from my mother. Like that friendship is really important. I think, oh, that's a lesson I learned from my mother. There's a poem I want to read that I think really gets at this. I'm not going to read the whole poem. It's a Mary Oliver poem, but the end of the poem in Blackwater Wood says, to live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it. And when the time comes to let it go, to let go. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it. And when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. And I think this is, our challenge in life is to love and to care deeply about ourselves, care deeply about those we engage with, care deeply about the world, care deeply about the future generations, and being able to let go, to really hold it close, and when the time comes, let it go. Breathing gently, I lovingly remember that I am the inheritor of my past actions, the owner of my present actions, and the fabricator of my future actions. My actions are the ground on which I stand. And this is the teaching of karma. And karma, the word karma just means intentional action of body, intentional action of speech, and intentional action of mind, like the sort of fantasies or thoughts of revenge. The sort of paths we let our minds go down, because we are shaped by our choices. We are shaped by the choices we've made in the past. And we are, although there are many factors that are not in our control, like the smoke today. I mean, all kinds of things are not in our control, but other people do, not in our control. What is in our control are our intentions, what our intentions are. And it is how we respond to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And I often, for myself, think about karma. Karma is what's on your plate, and you don't get to eat off of anyone else's plate. Karma is what's there for you, what you have to deal with, what circumstances are, and it's how we respond to these circumstances that really matter, and that we reflect on. I mean, when the Buddha talked in here about, like reflecting on what we've done in the past. And I have another sutta here, but we don't have time for me to read it, but it's his teaching to his son, Rahula, who was a young monk. And he said, Rahula, when you do something, think about, is this going to be harmful to me? Is this going to be harmful to someone else? Is this going to be harmful to me and someone else? And, for any action of body, speech, of mind, he said, so think about it before, think about it while you're doing it, and think about it afterwards. And if afterwards, you've made a mistake, you thought that what you were going to do was not going to be harmful, reflect on, where it is why it is that you made that mistake. So it's all about reflecting on we have the intention not to harm, and we do something and it turns out to be harmful. So often I think, sort of in being a good white person, I often have made just incredible blunders thinking that what I was going to do was to be helpful. And instead, I ended up sort of taking up space that probably was not mine to take up, or, that those sorts of things. So like really reflecting on that of, learning to be a good ally is often a little painful, not little, it can be painful about learning about sort of what you don't know, what your assumptions were. So that's what in this idea about looking at causes and conditions, like reflecting on. So when we make a mistake like that, we blunder, meaning to be helpful, and instead we've been harmful or have committed some sort of microaggression or something. Like really taking the time to reflect on what we didn't know, that we should have been better informed, we should have been more sensitive, and just learning from that, and choosing to learn from our mistakes, because what is so I have found so helpful about this path is it really is about cause and effect. And so when something doesn't seem right, I really reflect on, okay, so what, kind of go back, what wasn't right about that? I mean, a really silly example is when I used to work at the Minnesota AIDS Project, it was always such a big deal. People loved donuts, brought in donuts. And, if I would eat a donut, like it would taste okay. Oh, what's a donut? Like afterwards, I just feel crappy. And, it's like really realizing that, eating donuts, this is going to be the consequence. And then also, at the end of the day, I could say, so Trish, you were so good today, you didn't eat any donuts, but it was mostly about, looking at cause and effect, and looking at when things don't seem to be going well in our lives, to really reflect on, what happened? What didn't I know? Where could I have been more sensitive? And because we really care about our own welfare and the welfare of each other, of others. I mean, this is really metta, the loving kindness practice, the wanting to abandon ill will, wanting to act for the true benefit of ourselves and others. And so, that's really our motivation. And so we look at what we choose to do and also what we don't choose to do. And sometimes, for those of you who were raised as Catholics, there are, sins of commission and sins of omission. And sometimes choosing to ignore being helpful to another person, to ignore exerting ourselves, that the sort of harm that comes from not doing, as well as the harm that comes from doing. And I think that is all a part of karma. There's a suggestion that we should, in the choices we should make choices for the benefit of future species, humans and other species, that always in all of our choices about how we consume what we do, we're not just thinking about ourselves, but we're thinking about other beings and future beings. And I think that's one of the truly amazing things about human beings is, we're, as far as we know, the only species who can really care about future beings. And sometimes, future beings several generations ahead, that we think about what are the implications for future beings. The philosopher name eludes me for the moment, but he wrote a book about what do we owe the future? Very interesting book. What do we owe the future? And thinking about the sorts of choices we make now that will have a tremendous effect on future generations. And now probably, for example, with AI would be something that we think about, how that's going to have an effect on future generations. So this reflection on karma, this is in a Buddhist perspective, like this is what we own. We own our own karma. We are responsible for our actions, of body, of speech, of mind. And this is a really important reflection. And it is strengthened by doing the other reflections, that when we realize that, illness, infirmity await me. So what can I do now while I'm healthy? What can I do while I have the wherewithal to do something? Recognizing the importance of making the most of this moment. It is really what Mary Oliver is saying, to love this world, to love it, with your whole heart, and to be ready to let it go. So thank you for your kind attention, and I am happy to hear comments that people have, or questions, or just your own reflections. If you've worked with the daily reflections, and I know some people in the room and on Zoom have done that. So is there anyone on Zoom who would like to say anything? I can do that little hand raising, or I'll go to anyone in the room here, and we have a mic. Eric has the mic, which we want to use so that everyone on Zoom can hear that. And it's always an act of generosity to be the first one to do it, to ask a question. So if you want to work on your karma. And please, if it's okay, say your name.
So you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you so much for your talk. My name's Alex. I'm actually visiting, but I used to sit here about 10 years ago. So it's really nice to be sitting here again.
Great.
I guess I do practice with these sort of 5 remembrances a lot. And I'm just curious I'm thinking a lot about sort of non-separation and trying to work with that. And I'm curious about sort of construction of the 5 remembrances of this, this I'm of the nature to become separated from all the things I love, of the nature to die. And curious how you think through that construction of that. Almost feels like it's imbued with some sort of suffering, right? This sort of because I am separate from the notion of loss or of death, right? Suffering comes. So I'm curious about is there, how you think about sort of potentially some integration where if the eye is no longer separate from the body that is aging, is there sort of some cessation of the angst or of the dukkha that comes from these shifting mind body states.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I think that there is, for me, there's right now less angst. I don't know if something I already deal with right now I can say there's less angst. Who knows if circumstances were to change, if that would be really different. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about no birth, no death. And Thich Nhat Hanh talks about the idea of sort of being reabsorbed into nature. That Thich Nhat Hanh says, if you see a piece of paper, you need to see the cloud and the rain, and then the tree that grew, and and when the paper is burned, there are the ashes go back to the earth. So Thich Nhat Hanh talks much more about ourselves as kind of natural organisms that will be reabsorbed into the cosmos, reabsorbed into the natural world. And he talks about no birth, no death, that there really is no separation. There's just this kind of change of status in a way. I think that probably for many of us, sort of that the consciousness, the I, is what we struggle with, that ego. And the more we don't take things personally, the more we can see ourselves in others and see others in us. I mean, like truly, when I talked about sort of seeing, sort of some of the good qualities of friends that I've had, and that I just feel really grateful. Oh, I learned this from this person. And feeling also that some of what I have done has had an influence on other people who've been part of my life. So that there's more of that sort of exchanges is the wrong word, but sort of interpermeability, and that's the way we sort of live on in the goodness that we've generated and that has had an effect on other persons. And there is that sort of that the more existential sense of separation. I'll be separated from what I care. I will lose it. But loss is. Loss is a part of life. And one of the things that is probably hardest for us to contemplate is even like the loss of our mental faculties. That idea that that my that who I am, even in this lifetime, may diminish. That I might be unrecognizable to myself in a way. That's a very challenging contemplation. And it's something that I think encourages us to make the most of this moment. Like, what good can we do in this time? How can we make how can we make this a better place for future generations? So I think it kind of connects with that sense of not having an infinite, endless amount of time, but the contemplation that things may happen that are really distressing in some ways, and making that decision in this moment to do what is it that I can do and not put things off. Does that make sense, Alex? Other thoughts? Anyone on Zoom want to say anything? Anyone else here?
Hey, I'm Emily. I use she, her pronouns. I think I just want to say thank you, Patrice. These past few weeks, not in a wild way, but my partner and I have really been facing a lot of like sickness and death and loss and all of that stuff. Our poor, sweet little pup has just been struggling and struggling. And I think I realized, like, I was sitting with that in my own set. And then when you like went through the contemplations, I was like, oh, honey, like that's what's going on. Like you have so much, like there's so much grasping. Like I noticed myself being so much like, we can control this, like we can figure this out. There's all these things, I can do, when it's like, oh gosh, hon, that's not how this works. And so I think there's, again, obviously a lot of contemplation about my own death and my own, aging and all of that. That's important. But I think there's the other piece for me too, of like the noticing of how much just in general in our society, there's a belief of like, we have control over this somehow. And so I think there's an ease that can come, I think, from even just acknowledging like, yeah, that's what's going on. Like this is how this dynamic is playing out. So I appreciate that. Thank you for bringing this tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's being honest about this, although it may sound sort of grim, but to be really honest about this is how it is. We come into this world and we leave this world, and having pets and being with pets through their aging and their death can be really, really instructive for us in many, many ways. And it is really, it's a beautiful thing when people can be honest about what's going on, what their sorrow is around things, what their fears are around things. It is so difficult when we have to keep up appearances and pretend that things aren't as scary or as sad as they are right now. And to be able to talk with each other about serious things and reflect on serious things and contemplate futures that may be pretty bleak. And I really think that's what this practice prepares us to do, to really turn towards suffering, our own suffering and the suffering of others, and to learn to have some courage in the face of it, the courage of being honest, the courage of showing up, of not abandoning, of not turning away. And that's something that is a practice. It's not something that may happen instantly, but it's a practice to learn to show up, to learn to be able to be with what is really difficult, and not abandon people. And there's an article by some bioethicists who had a very deep impact on me. But one of the things they said, even in the most terrible situations, like things that happen in the neonate ward, where there's none of the outcomes is a desirable outcome. None of them the outcomes are anything that anyone wants. And they said you can make that terrible situation less terrible by not abandoning your patients or their parents, about staying with people, about showing up. And one of the comments that they made, like, as things are falling apart in this world, with whether it's political, whether it's the environment, it's about not abandoning. It's about being able to stay with the difficulty, to stay with the suffering, not to leave people alone. And I think that that's something that we can, as a community, resolve, that we will be here for each other, that we will have each other's backs, and that we will be honest. And that seems to me to be a wonder, that somehow makes it better, that we will be here for each other, that we will be honest, and that we will tell the truth about how we see things. So almost 9 o'clock. So thank you all for your kind attention tonight. Shelley will be back next week. I will be seeing Cabaret, so I'm not going to be here. Eric, did you want to say something?
Yes, I have a couple of announcements, and also everything we do here at Common Ground is done in the spirit of Dharma, freely given, freely received. We don't charge anything for any of our programs. Everybody who serves here, except for the small amount of paid staff, do so on a volunteer basis. And when we have guest teachers like tonight with Patrice, all the monies that we receive on those evenings, 2/3 of that goes directly to the teacher, 1/3 goes to the center. And so if you do feel moved to make a donation, there are Donna bowls right behind this wall here. And then there is also a little credit card machine that I or maybe Chelsea can help you with. So thank you. And thank you, Patrice, for tonight. A couple of announcements. Day-long retreat for the BIPOC community with Stacy McClendon, Saturday, August 9th, here at the center, 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Half-day retreat on Saturday the 16th with Gabe Keller Flores from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And out at the retreat center, Labor Day retreat with Shelley Graff and Mark Nunberg, Saturday, August 23rd in the evening to Monday, September 1st, midday. Register for retreats, courses, and workshops at commongroundmeditation.org/calendar. And thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. If I could have a couple people to help put these chairs over on this side, just up against the wall, that would be great. And thank you.